Welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games, where we feed our people with relatable content and our victory condition is your satisfaction. I'm Harry, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and also to click on that bell notification button so that when we are doing our thing, YouTube lets you know. Today I have another board game review for you all. Today I'm going to be reviewing this game right here, Notre Dame, this Stefan Feld classic published by Ravensburger Games. I'm going to set the game up, give you guys a few ideas as to how the game actually plays, and then we're going to come back with my final thoughts and grades. So this is what the game looks like set up for 2 players, and as a matter of fact, you set up the game for 2 players the same way you would for a 4-player game. First of all, the board is modular with all of these individual player boards that you place on the board according to the player count, as well as the modular center of the board, which is also dependent on the player count. You shuffle these different messages in the players' colors, and if you're playing a 2-player game, there's only 2 players, so you choose 2 other random colored ones and put them on the opposing sides, just as the 2 players that are actually playing will also be on opposing sides. You shuffle these down, and these are different messages that your carriage, as it travels along Notre Dame, can pick up and give you different benefits when you reveal what's underneath the tile. So again, as I mentioned, each player starts with a carriage. They also start with 4 cubes in their player color, which the game refers to it as your influence, but look at it basically as workers that you'll be placing down, as well as a helper who's a little bit more flexible, more maneuverable, but at the same time does things very similar to what your cubes do. Each player also starts with 3 coins as their starting money, and they have a hand or a deck of 9 cards, which they will be drafting as the game progresses to make their decisions. This game plays in 9 rounds. Now, even though you start with 4 cubes in your own personal supply, you do put the remainder of the different colored cubes of the players playing in the general supply, and there are actions you can do in the future to retrieve some of them and add them to your general supply or your personal supply, and therefore have them available for you. So let us simulate round number 1 out of 9. Now, first of all, I forgot to mention, we also have these special characters that are very helpful because, first of all, at the end of the round, you can pay them 1 coin if you have, in order to benefit from whatever help it is that they give you. But also, it's very important to look on the bottom of the card. You see some rat symbols here, and this is going to determine the level or the threat of the plague at the end of the round. So you're going to look at all the rats that are combined in all the characters, the special characters, and that's how much you're going to advance in the plague track at the end of each round if you don't do something about it. And the problem with the plague track is it makes you lose victory points if you go past a certain threshold, and it also makes you lose influence on the board. So it's very hurtful and harmful in that way. So as much as possible, you want to slow down the plague track, although it's virtually impossible to stop it altogether. So there are 6 combined rats in these character cards, which means each of our respective plague tracks are going to go up 6 at the end of this round unless we do something about it. And I'll explain what we may or may not do. All right, so you're going to shuffle your deck as a player, and you're going to draw 3 cards. Each player is going to draw 3 cards. And they're going to look at the 3 cards, and they're going to pick one, basically the action they're most interested in. Because these cards, what they're going to allow you to do is they're going to grant you the right to do certain actions. So I'm looking at this here. This is very helpful in this condition because this is a hospital, and it will help me lower the infection that I get as a player from the plague. So I might want to consider adding this one. This card right here, if I place a worker down on that spot, this allows me to get more cubes or influence from the general supply. This one here will get me more coins, and coins are useful in lots of different ways. I think I'm going to play the conservative game, and I'm going to draft this one. And then you basically hand the remaining cards clockwise, or if you're playing a 2-player game, to the other player. Let's make the decision for this guy here. Okay, so he's got the Notre Dame action. And whenever you can, you want to do the Notre Dame action, because the Notre Dame action, not only does it give you points when you do it, and you give a donation to Notre Dame, but it's also going to give you points at the end of every 3 rounds, right? So this game is played in 9 rounds, and those 3 rounds are divided into 3 sections every 3 rounds. You will have a special scoring. Even though you're going to be scoring points throughout the game, you're going to have a special scoring at the end of every 3 rounds. If you have a presence in Notre Dame, you're going to get victory points. So you do not want to leave your opponent alone in Notre Dame, because it's a collective amount of points. And if you're both there, you're going to have to split the victory points. But if your opponent is all by him or herself in Notre Dame, they're going to get all the points. So blue player is definitely going to draft this one and pass these cards here. So now let's see what the green player wants to keep out of these 2. He's going to keep the special, the helper card. This card is going to allow you to maneuver your helper and put him somewhere. So that'll be very helpful. He'll pass this card to the blue player. The blue player is looking at these 2 cards, and you know what? He wants to go to Notre Dame, so having some money can be very helpful because he wants to be generous in his donations, but he also wants to have money at the end of the round to benefit from one of these special characters. So he's going to keep the coin card here, and now there's no more decision to be made, because once you get handed that 3rd card, you don't have a decision. That's the 3rd card in your hand. Now here's the thing. Even though you have 3 cards in your hand, so after we're done with the drafting phase of a round, that's simultaneous. Now we will go to turn order. There will be a first player marker that will be exchanged throughout the game. And you have 3 cards to choose from, but you're only going to get to use 2 of those cards during the game. So you're going to play both of yours in a row, but you're only going to pick 2 out of the 3. That 3rd card is not going to be used at all. So, but it's a 3rd option for if you happen to change your mind, right? So I'm going to play this card right here, and it allows me to put a cube in the hospital. So the first thing that happens is whenever you put a cube in the hospital, you are going to decrease your plague track by 1. Now, the plague track right now is at 0, so that's not going to change, right? But not only do you decrease it by 1, but at the end of the round, right before you trigger the advancement of the plague, you're going to heal 1 for each cube that you have in the hospital. So I'm thinking the future right now. Right now, this is not going to help me too much, but in the future, if I build a good amount of cubes here, it will slow down the infection, and I could really benefit from that. Okay, I'm also going to play this card here, which is going to grant me the helper. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to play that one. Now that I ended up getting this one back, I'm going to play this one right here. And I'm going to put a cube on this area here. And this is going to allow me to grab another cube from the supply and add it to my personal supply. So I've done my 2 actions. I will discard the 3rd card, and we're done. Now, the blue player is going to go. And first and foremost, they're going to play this card here, which allows them to put an influence in that building here, which allows them to get a coin. So now they have 1 more coin. Now, the blue player will play this card, which allows them to put an influence in Notre Dame. And when you place an influence in Notre Dame, you have 3 options as far as your donation is concerned. You can either donate 1 coin and get 1 victory point for it, or you can donate 2 coins and get 3 victory points for it. Or finally, you can donate 3 coins and get 6 victory points from it. So, since I have enough money to spare, the blue player is going to pay 3 coins, and they're going to get 6 victory points, the first 6 victory points of the game. And they're done with their 3 cards. Now, at the end of the round, again, we have a phase in which we can seek for help from these special characters here at the price of paying 1 coin. So the green player is still the first player for the time being, so they get to activate first, and they're going to pay 1 coin, and these are the different characters that are available. You can either use this guy that allows you to move up to 3 cubes from one location, one sector in your area to another one. That could be very helpful for when you're changing your strategy or your focus. This guy right here, the monk, allows you to get 2 cubes and a victory point. And finally, this guy right here allows you to score 1 victory point for every empty sector on your side of Notre Dame. So that looks like the most beneficial to me, especially because I know that the blue player is going to do it, and they're actually going to benefit even more than the green player. So I don't want to fall very much behind, and they already have a 6 victory point lead. So I'm going to count every empty sector. There are 7 sectors. I have cubes on 2 of them. Therefore, I have 5 empty sectors, and I will score 5 victory points. Now, the blue player, even though the green player played first, just because the green player buys the services of a character does not mean that the blue player cannot benefit from the same character. So the blue player is going to pay 1 coin to benefit off the very same character that gives you 1 victory point for every empty sector. And again, the blue player has only 1 cube in their sectors because they placed their other cube in Notre Dame. So they actually have 6 empty sectors. Therefore, they're going to collect 6 coins or 6 victory points for using that character. So they actually benefited slightly more than the green player. All right. And this is pretty much what the game looks like. You play again 9 rounds. You will be alternating the first player marker, which does make a bit of a difference as far as executing certain actions and things like that. But it's not really a game-breaking advantage either. And you're going to be doing all these things. And as the game progresses, again, oh wait, real big thing I forgot to do is advance the plague track. So again, there are 6 rats here, which is actually pretty high. It's higher than average. So don't get too intimidated. We're each going to advance on the plague track by 6. And the plague track only goes to 9. So once you need to surpass 9, the cube itself does not move past 9, but you will deal with whatever the consequence is for having surpassed the threshold, which the consequence is always the same. It's the loss of 2 victory points, which is very hurtful, and the loss of 1 influence cube, in particular in the region in which you have the most influence in. So that could be very hurtful. And not only that, but it's not like the cube actually goes back to your personal supply. The lost cube actually goes to your general supply. So it hurts you in lots of ways in that sense. So if you can hold back the plague, you're going to want to do so by investing in the hospital and also the park. Those are the 2 areas that help you with that. All right, guys, let's see what my final thoughts and grades are on this game. So that is how you play Notre Dame. So let's get straight to my final thoughts and grades. First of all, we're going to start with components. I'm going to give this game a D, right? Not a total utter failure, but the components, while very functional, I like the way you have the modular center of the board and how, depending on the player count, you have these all the different modules that make up the board all together. That idea is cool, very functional, but I do not like the presentation. I do not like how those actual modular boards look. I do not like the color schemes. And while I'm very forgiving about the way a box looks, I'm a little bit more critical as far as how the actual board and components look like. So yeah, I'm very unsatisfied with the colors, the graphic design, and even the shape of how these modular boards look. The cards are okay, but the artwork leaves a lot to be desired. The cubes, I mean, I'm okay with a game if cubes are the main component as far as wood is concerned, but I wouldn't have minded if the cubes were a little bit bigger. Probably the coolest, component, and it's nothing that wows you or anything like that, is the nice little wooden carriages that you use to move throughout the city. So I got to give this game a D as far as components are concerned. Now, as far as theme is concerned, I'm going to give this game an F. Yes, you heard me, an F. What the heck is this game about? I don't even know. And if I have to read or reread the first paragraph or 2 of your rule book in order to remind myself of what the theme is, then I'm sorry. You probably don't have a theme. I don't care. I can still think a game is great, even if it's themeless, even if it gets an F. But I still have to be honest with you, folks. This game gets an F as far as theme is concerned. Now let's talk about novelty factor. Actually, for this category, I'm going to be very generous. I'm going to give this game an A for novelty factor. First of all, we have to factor in when this game came in. This game came in 2007. We're talking about nearly 14 years ago. So it is a long time. Now, the first thing that I like, or that I give it credit to as far as novelty factor, is using this mechanism that was still very new at the time, which was this pick and pass card drafting mechanism. And at that point, there weren't many games, if any, that were doing it. It wasn't, Seven Wonders was still not out in the market. What else? Sushi Go was still not out in the market. So lots of these more modern pick and pass card drafting games weren't out there. And, you know, Stefan Feld implemented this in a very cool way, right? Where the card draft wasn't about possessions, right? Usually, sometimes these card drafting games are cards that you will eventually place on your tableau and own them. In this case, the card drafting was actually just going to control actions going forward and what options you would have as far as the actions are concerned. Also, the idea of the card management and the card drafting being integrated with a worker placement like mechanism. And again, we're talking about 2007. There weren't many worker placement games at that time. And while Notre Dame doesn't usually come up as a worker placement game, this is what's happening. You're placing cubes, and yes, your cards give you the option as to where you can place the cubes, but ultimately you're placing cubes in certain spots. Yes, you have your own individual city board, so there's no blocking of spots as far as that is concerned, but there's some other worker placements out there in the market that don't have that whole blocking element to it. But instead, you're placing your cubes to trigger certain actions, and you do need to be crafty and strategic and thoughtful about how you use those cubes and where you place them, right? So I think that that is really cool. Also, the limited supply of workers, right? The idea that, and again, your prestige, as they call it, or actually the prestige is the victory points, your influence, as they call it, it is represented by your cubes, which are your workers in theory. And this idea that you start with a limited pool, you only have 4, but you have ways of retrieving additional workers from the supply and adding them to your personal supply so that you could have more. That is really cool. And I've seen other worker placement games copy on that idea in the future. For example, Deadwood, the Wild West city building worker placement game, where you start with just 3 cowboys in your ranch, and as the game progresses, you're trying to add a few more cowboys into your ranch so that you could use them for your worker placement actions. So again, that idea I find to be pretty cool, pretty novel. There were other worker placement games out there in the market at this time, but they weren't really implementing that. You had a fixed number of workers and they were just available for you, right? So, and also the idea that when you place workers, you always get them back. Here in this game, there's a permanence, right? Because when you place those cubes, again, your influence on these different sectors of the city, they stay there, right? The only way they move is not because you trigger a, retrieval of them at the end of the round, but because when you want to use a worker, if you don't have one available in your supply, you always have the option of grabbing one that's already present and moving it. That's the only way they would ever really move. So I found that to be pretty innovative. I think about games like El Grande that might have done it before. El Grande, in theory, is not really a worker placement game, even though you might consider it such. It's just an area majority game. But yes, El Grande had this idea that you had your caballeros who were immediately available in your court, and those who you retrieve from the province to bring to your court in order to use them. Okay, so then what else? The cumulative effects of workers. The idea that you place a cube and it triggers a certain ability for you. But in a future turn, if you place a cube again and there's already additional cubes there, then you'll be able to trigger that benefit multiple times. I think that's really cool. And again, future worker placement games piggybacked on this idea. So you've got to give Notre Dame lots of credit for that. And also the idea of this game that introduces calamity, right? It introduces disaster, some way that the game basically attacks the players. But we're not talking about a cooperative game. This is a fully competitive game where the game bites back. That to me is pretty innovative. Stefan Feld himself piggybacked on the idea in future games, including games that he designed not too long afterward. But other people in the industry have also kind of worked on that idea of this game is mean, this game is beyond stingy, right? Because there's just games that are stingy. This game is mean and brutal, and it's out to kill you, and your success is going to look meager, right? You're not going to be feeling very prosperous, very wealthy at the end of this game. The comfort you'll have is that you were able to out-survive or outlast your opponents around the table. But I find that to be a really cool, neat idea when combined with what already is a very solid game. So overall, I'm going to get to my overall game. I'm going to give this game an A. Yes, I'm going to give this game an A. I think this is an excellent game. As a matter of fact, this game, if the components and the theme, definitely the components, were much better, I would be yelling off the rooftops for this game. But I don't, because even though I like it very much, I understand the climate of the board game hobby, especially now in 2021, and how important, or even more important, components are to most gamers. So I don't want to overhype a game that gamers are going to buy, open up, and be disinterested in because of how it looks. But if you are the type of gamer that can look past that stuff, and you can look past, you know, the shine and the glitter, and just look at the core design of a game and appreciate it for what it is, then you should consider getting Notre Dame. Really good game. I give it an overall grade of A. And that's it, folks. Thank you so much for joining us at When Harry Met Board Games. Consider clicking on one of these 4 videos on the screen. If YouTube is recommending it to you, it's because they think it's a really good chance that you will like one of them. And also check down in the description and check my the link to my Patreon account so that you can see how you might become a patron and a supporter of this channel and be more involved in the creative and behind the scenes process. There must be a tier out there that works for you. All right, this is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.